Hey fellas, welcome to Guys in Grief, sponsored by Emma's Footprints and First Candle. We started this podcast for fathers like us that have experienced pregnancy or infant loss. You see, when we went through these life-changing experiences, we struggled to find resources that were specifically for men in support of navigating this grieving process. We're not doctors. We're not psychiatrists. We're three friends. We're grieving fathers that have been through the unthinkable and want to help others by talking about the unique and often undiscussed perspective of men that have experienced child loss. We welcome you to join us on this journey. Share your stories, the challenges, laugh with us, maybe shed a tear or two, and help each other as we navigate honoring our children, grief, supporting our family, and trying to find better days ahead. Let's get into it. Well, hey, everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Guys in Grief. Brian, Brandon, how are you boys?
Wonderful, wonderful. How are you guys doing?
Doing great, thank you.
Always good to be back with you guys.
Absolutely.
Agreed. And man, what listeners, if you didn't listen to our first ever guest episode number 2 with our friend Shane Connolly,
Fantastic.
boys, that was
Shout out,
powerful,
Shane.
huh? Shout out to
That
Shane.
was awesome. Yeah. And Sloan.
Absolutely. Incredibly powerful hearing him tell his story of losing Sloan just 6 months ago, and the rawness and real of what he's going through today, that we're all still going through today, but you know, he's much closer in time frame than us three gents. It brought up a lot of emotions for all of us, but it was
He's
incredible.
In the early
and his
stage, as we know, is a tough time, and you know, I can't wait to check in with Shane, and he's part of our family now.
Absolutely. I admire his courage and bravery to share his story, and his wife's willingness to do so as well. You know, this isn't easy, the journey that we've gotten ourselves into, and it does take our collective village to be supporting of it. So I really appreciate Shane for joining us. And guys, we're going to get into a pretty special episode here today where we are going to share our first host story, where the one and only Brandon Thurman will talk to us about Astoria Lee Thurman. But before we get into that, Brian, shoot it over to you for a little G&G Q&A.
All right, guys, we got G&G Q&A. So since Brandon is going to be telling his story, I'm going to direct this at Brad. And I also want to encourage our listeners to send in questions, because we love to hear from you guys, and you know, we're giving our take on it, but please send in questions that you have that you think would be an interesting topic to discuss. So Brad, I think this is an important one, and you know, I think a lot of dads and families can relate to this, but in a lot of situations, loss occurs when you do have living children. And you had your son Ashton, and you know, Ash is a very important part of your life. Can you talk a little bit about Ash and how he helped you through the grieving process?
Yeah, I remember when we lost Beckham, especially our first loss. I mean, Ashton's an unbelievable part of our life, and has been huge through the grieving process. But I remember saying to people, especially with Beckham, thank God we have Ashton, because he gives us purpose. He gives us a little bit of levity to, you know, just raise a kid. And I remember leaving the hospital after losing Beckham, and it was by the time
how old was Ash when he lost
Ash,
Beckham?
good question. He would have been a little over 2 years. So 2 years, 2 months, give or take. And so we come home, it's like November 21st or something, right around Brandon's birthday. And Brandon spent his birthday grieving with me in my basement, drinking a lot of booze and drinking away my sorrows for a moment or two.
A lot of tears.
Yeah. So it was like November 21st or something that we come back from the hospital. And if you guys remember my Connecticut house, like surrounded by trees and just leaves everywhere. I used to have to rake for days. And I come home and my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, and Ashton are out playing in the leaves. Like Kirk, my father-in-law, just made huge leaf piles. And I see Ashton like living his best life, just jumping around, diving into these leaf piles. And we pull in and it's sort of like, oh shit, like time to be dad again. Like, he's 2. He doesn't know. He knew a little bit, and he certainly knows now. We talk about Beckham and Ari every day, but at that moment in time, he was just happy playing in the leaves, and he was happy to see us because he hadn't seen us for a couple days. Right, we were in the hospital for 3 days, and so it was sort of jumping right back into being a dad. But in a lot of ways, that was the only coping mechanism that really seemed to work, was being a dad to Ashton 100% of the time. And I will say is, I know I've mentioned this to you guys before. There was also a part of me that felt a little guilt on some of that too. When we held Beckham for 4 hours and had, an amazing experience with him, I remember coming home and spending time with Ashton. And again, I love my son to death, but there was not a resentment, but it was a weird dynamic. I can't put my fingertip on the right word of, I have Ashton, but I don't have Beckham. And I struggled with how to navigate what I have and what I don't have, and filling my heart in that moment, and how to just still be a good dad and, play trucks and, watch shows and do normal life shit for a 2-year-old that can't wrap his head around this. I mean, we've talked,
normal.
Yeah. Right. We've talked so much on this podcast already, just episode 3, of like adults that don't know how to act normal and wrap their head around this, let alone a 2-year-old. And in some senses, like, thank God that they don't, because they bring us a lot of light in this space. But Ashton, once I got past the, like, what I have and what I don't have heaviness, it just became putting a ton of time, effort, focus, love into Ashton, and continuing to try to grow our family, of course, shortly thereafter. But I don't know how we would have moved forward in that moment if we didn't have Ashton at that moment in time.
And that's interesting because, and I think, Brandon, you had a similar experience to me.
Yep.
I really leaned heavily on my son, Colin, who he was close to 2 when we lost Austin. And I honestly don't know what I would have done without him, because I wanted to spend every moment with him. I remember in Austin's funeral, I just had to hold Colin. Like, I was in tears crying, and he was hugging me like, I love you, Dad. And that was part of the healing process for me.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you, Brian, on that. When we lost the Stori, Gabby was about 2 years old. Yeah, geez. She was about 2. So
yeah,
she was.
Yeah. I sat on that a lot with her, just making sure that she was happy as a clam, didn't want or need for a thing, and just making sure that structure for her was on point.
Yeah, and it's amazing the power a 2-year-old can have as an adult, as like a healer.
Really?
They don't necessarily know what they're doing.
So the innocence of a child.
Right.
It is. And I mean, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for Colin. I mean, he saved me in a lot of, aspects of it. And I'm so grateful for him and what we had. But it's an interesting perspective where, you can feel that resentment like you had a little bit, Brad, early on.
Mm-hmm.
And it was short-lived, but it was like, the day of or two. And look, I was very happy to play in the leaves. Like, don't get me wrong. I was really, really excited to see my son and be a dad to Ashton in that moment. But I felt such a strong connection with Beckham that it was triggering for me, is probably the right word, and a word that dads might relate to, that it was a trigger of, here's my living son. And I just, hours ago left my dead son at the hospital. Yeah. And that was a super hard trigger for me in those moments.
Yeah. And I also felt guilt too, just guilt of being a dad and you just feel the guilt of losing your son or daughter, and you have to continue to be super dad. And it's a lot, it's a heavy weight to carry.
Speak more into that, just on the balance of being the father and then also still being the husband. It's a heavy load. Those are 2 different things. People don't, you forget, being a father, being a husband. you're challenging, you're fighting between both just to kind of make the things happen around here. For sure.
And
I think that's a good segue into your story.
Yeah, and maybe another G&G Q&A at some point too is, how do you grieve in front of your living child?
I'm taking notes now.
Yeah, put a marker in that one, because that's a big part of what we didn't just talk about, and I think it's appropriate for us to continue to move on here, but because we focused on the importance of our children and how they helped us heal, but also how do you go through what we're going through in front of a 2-year-old that doesn't know any better and doesn't know why dad's crying in the corner and why mom's inconsolable, and they shouldn't. And so, yeah, well, let's put a pin in coming back to that one.
Absolutely.
So, as we mentioned off the top, really looking forward to this discussion. And, I think I wonder if you guys are like me, like people ask about the podcast and I'm like, yeah, I'm excited to do that. That's not the right word. Looking forward to it. That's not the right word either. Like it's weird, right? Because of the subject matter, but I am looking forward to this discussion of having one of our incredible hosts share their story as Brandon Thurman.
That's why we're here, right?
Exactly right.
Celebrate Stori and our children, our lost children, and yeah.
Absolutely. And so, I think it's powerful for us to, as we did in our intro pod, give you a little bit of a taste of what we've been through, but for us to really dive into it and understand the experiences that we've had, the emotions that we've gone through, answer the same types of questions that we're trying to get into for all of you and how we navigated them ourselves. And, this is particularly touching because of our relationship together. And as all of you know, Brandon is my brother-in-law. Astoria is my niece. And so I'm honored to help facilitate some of this conversation along with Brian. So Brandon, let's get into it, my man. So
first things first.
Yes, please.
I appreciate you saying is, not was. That means a lot. Thank you.
Absolutely. And clarity that a clarification that's important to always make.
I appreciate that. I really do.
Absolutely. And so you had Gabby.
I had Gabby.
Healthy, amazing baby girl, and Gabby. She's a model. For those of you, we were just talking about this.
Toy model.
Fisher Price model at 5 years old.
Miss Princess to be told.
Yeah. And so you guys go through, multiple rounds of trying and
IVF, so on and so forth. That was, both pregnancies were a struggle.
Weren't easy journeys.
Weren't easy. We went through IVF. We went through every needle, every injection, every aspect of it, just to kind of get to the point.
Every dollar in your bank account.
Literally dollar in our bank account.
With both pregnancies?
Both pregnancies, yes.
Yeah.
So thankfully, we were pregnant twice. We were more time, but these two were heavy. Gabby, obviously, beautiful child, wonderful 5-year-old, fantastic young lady. Then Storia, her younger sister. I'll start off. Basic story. I went to a concert on Saturday, April 6th, 2019. The concert was Justin Timberlake.
Justin Timberlake, right? Yeah. I remember.
We cannot listen to Justin Timberlake anymore, by the way, in this household. Just so that you guys know.
Trigger.
Went with a bunch of my wife's friends, Joellen's friends, best friends, because she wasn't in the mood to go. I'm like, you know what? I love going to concerts. I'm in. Well, throughout the concert, Joellen's texting me, you know what? I don't feel too good. I was going to go to sleep. I'm like, babe, just go get some food. Astoria, it was during, our, weekly hospital visits. She was kind of tough getting the heartbeat and stuff like that. Backtrack on this story. We found that our daughter Astoria had Downs. So we were going to the hospitals getting checkup every week just to make sure everything was going right and, the process was going well. We were ready for that.
And preparing yourselves for a child with Downs too, right? Like us as a family, my parents, your parents, us as a support system.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
This is our doing. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were ready for this with all guns a-blazing. And, we'll go to our routines. Story will give, the doctor a hard time. just catching a heart monitor, making sure everything was right. So we didn't think anything of it. So I'm like, babe, just have some orange juice, have some, graham crackers, she'll start moving around again, so on and so forth. So Joella goes to sleep. I come home from the concert, and she's like, you know what, B, I'm like, you know what, let's just kind of hold off a little bit, let's wait, have you had this, have you had that? And it was a yes, and we did our extra
And how far
steps.
along is Joellen at this time? How far along is she?
Oh, sorry, my bad. So it's 36 weeks. So prior to that, excuse me.
So
prior to
the
that,
due date is
her due date.
away.
So we went
right around the corner.
Right around the corner. So Thursday we went to the doctors to get our final checkup. All right, we'll see you on Monday. Sorry, Tuesday. We'll see you on Tuesday. So our last day of work was on Friday. We're already planning. We'll be out the rest of the week, a couple weeks with having this baby. So we're normal pregnancy in our head. We're all right, we're going to have another pregnancy. Let's have another baby. So we're already ready. Thursday, doctor's office. Saturday, concert. Saturday night, Sunday morning. We're like, she calls her doctor. He goes, you know what? I'm not worried. Just go to emergency just to get a check-in. You'll be there again on Tuesday. Just go, get a check-in. You should be fine. I just saw you Thursday. Now, mind you, going into that, we're like, it's okay. We didn't have nothing kind of packed in the house yet. We didn't have the baby stuff done in the room. It was just like we were ready. Like, we're going to this blind. We end up going to emergency just to kind of get it. We're just here for a check just to make sure everything was good. Doctor pulls the check out just to make sure everything was good. We get into the emergency. They're like, hey, to the office. They do I totally got a brain fart. What do they call it? Stuff on the belly.
The jelly?
The jelly.
Yeah,
Jeez.
This is a guy's podcast.
Yeah. This is literally the
Wives would know in a second.
The exact description of this being a guy's description.
Is that it?
Yeah.
I'm going to mark that as a clip. That is perfect.
So they do the sonogram.
The jelly.
And
the jelly.
The jelly. They do the sonogram, and the nurse is a young girl. She's like, her face turns pale. Now, me, I'm sitting there. I'm like, oh, maybe she's just new. She don't know what she's doing. She calls in the doctor, and the doctor kind of looks at us with a very pale face. So says, sorry, I have some bad news for you. And me and Joel are like, wait, what? Like, yeah, we know our baby has Downs. She has a hard time, catching feelings. So, like, what else? Like, well, we don't see a heartbeat. We're like, wait, what? Like, yeah, we don't see a heartbeat. Joel, I'm like, no, they like, check again. Like, she moves around a lot. Check again. Sir, like, there's no heartbeat. There's a few things in life that kind of sit me back and make me, like, hit reality. I kind of put this in the back burners of not bringing it up all the time. But, like, to hear your wife or your significant other kind of, like, feel helpless and weak. And if anyone knows Joellen, she's the strongest person I've ever met in my life. Ever. To hear her weak and not have any strength in her, that was the moment right there. The tears that we both had during that moment were puddle of tears on the floor. I think the one thing after that is we asked, like, okay, what's the next step? And like, well, you have to wait. And we said, why? Because you had food, so we can't do anything right now. You got to let the food go through the system. But the baby's dead inside her belly, so we can't do anything. Like, what do you mean? Like, you got to wait. So we had to wait until the morning. Now, prior to that, now I'm making these phone calls to our family. So the first phone call was to my sister, if I'm correct. Me and her are thick as thieves, so I had to call her. But then the next phone call was to Brad, and that was the very, very difficult phone call. Just with both the phone calls, but that was difficult too, obviously, because me and him are thick as thieves too. So then the next phone call was to our families and to my mother and to my father-in-law, to my mother-in-law, and to my dad, my stepdad. And those phone calls, you can hear the pain they felt with us. I push this stuff down just so that I don't go back to that feeling of just helplessness. I guess that's the guy code of being strong. But at the end of the day,
you can almost hear the silence.
You can
which
hear
is weird
it.
to say that.
It was.
Yeah.
It was. Yes. It was not a. It was a moment that I keep saying I don't like bringing up just because it hurt me, because I'm a person that doesn't like to have that type of feeling at all. I'm very upbeat and up tempo majority of the time. So for me to have to make these phone calls to my family that I love, and they have to hear pain in my voice, I'm in tears, telling them that we lost Astoria, and there's nothing no one can do. We're always in control. So to not have control, that hurts. So we make the phone calls. We do what we have to do. We have to stay in the hospital for the next day. So we're going into the 17th. We had to wait until all the food digests out of her system, out of my wife's system. Now we had her at Stori. We had her at Stori. Jeez. We had her at Sisters Hospital, where we also had a Gavi. My wife's doctor, Dr. Bruno, shout out to him. Fantastic guy. He is probably the most even keel person on earth, but very straight to the point. And for this one to happen, he came to our bedside, which he never does, and almost struck a tear on how bad and how sad he was, because he's been Joellen's doctor since teenage years. So he's watched her grow up.
And he's like the doctor for our like my mom's doctor and stuff too, right? So like Dr. Bruno has been around for a long time.
Forever. Him and his dad. So it's like,
yeah,
we look at it like that. Like he's like looking at his daughter in pain, and it's that hit me hard too. So we finally get the green light to have the baby, but now we have to have the baby the same way we had our previous daughters. My wife had a C-section, so everything is kind of the same thing. The only thing is we're birthing a dead child. So it's not as happy as it was before. It's not as rushed and not as gleeful as it was before. It's not as smiley as it was before. There's still this little bit of glimpse of like, in my heart, she's going to wake up. She's going to wake up. She's going to wake up. My God told me that everything that you pray for is going to happen. She's going to wake up. So I'm still having this little glimpse of hope, but also, I think we just talked about this earlier, just having some guilt. Like, did I do something to mess this up? What did I do? What's going on? Like, am I at fault? Did I do something? What's going? Like, come on! Like, this is not fair. Again, this is where we talked about earlier, like in our previous podcast, of having our faith kind of be taken away from us a little bit, just on you're losing your child. So we go through the process. Sorry to backtrack on that, but we go through the process. We go through the C-section aspect things. We get in there. They take her out, Astoria. They take her out, and she looks just like Gavi.
Yeah. That's
where it hit me even worse. Same full set of hair as a newborn. Looked just like
Skin
her. Skin tone. Only difference is Astoria had some skin, peeled off her mouth, on her arms, on her legs. So it was bloody. So And also she had Down, so you can see a little bit of the separation in her eyes, but she looked like Gabby. And that took me to like a whole nother, like, I can't lose two children. Like, I can't do this. Like, this is, you're going to wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. These are the things I'm whispering to her while I'm holding her in my arms. You can feel her body, how cold she was. Man. You can feel, like, those are feel, like, I would never wish this upon any of my worst enemies. The feeling of holding your own child in your hands, and you could feel their body and how cold that is. Not like, not something I wish upon anyone, even my worst enemies.
And you can't believe it either.
You can't.
Right?
You're so in shock.
I remember that cold feeling with Austin, and I just said the same thing. Like, he's gonna wake up. You know,
I don't know. This is sorry to interject here, Brandon, but the urn that we have Beckham's ashes in is always cold. And I kiss it like every day when I walk by it. It's just under a dresser on the way out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you know, Brian, you always talk about, you and Lindsay are so good at like, look for the signs, you know, check. And that I'm no scientist or anything or whatever the right word, but like, if you were asking me my heart of hearts, like the temperature of Beckham and the temperature of that urn, or to the 0.001, like same degree. And so I know, sorry to interject on my story here a little bit, but like I know that temperature. I know what you're talking about, and I feel it still every day.
I again, for me, I have to kind of push that. I'll be walking around like a grump all day, and I have to like kind of move and think positive about the situation. Like, our story's up there, or she's up there watching over us, making sure we do knucklehead things. Like, that's just what she's doing.
So how do you do that, Brandon? So you get done, because I think we're only on episode 3, but hopefully listeners, you've started to figure out, like, these are 3 really positive guys. And I think of the group of us, Brandon might be like the shining beacon of positivity and the life of the party. And literally, if you ever go anywhere where people are hanging out, like, everybody gravitates towards Brandon. And it's just a solid fact.
Weird fact.
Yeah.
Weird fact.
And now you are the dad in this terrible scenario. Yeah. How does life of the party Brandon take that next step? You leave the hospital, you start recognizing this is your new normal. How does that happen?
I think it goes back to, we talked about this in a previous podcast, of you're leaving the hospital and it's just 2 of you. You go into it thinking that it's going to be 3 of you, thinking you're going to have a household of 4. Car seat's empty. What do you do? All right, hold on. Oh, man, okay. Babe, how are you doing? You doing okay? No, I'm not doing okay. Like, you got to step up. Brandon, we got to make sure Joellen's okay. Joellen has to be okay. She has to be strong. She has to get back to work. She has to get back to being herself. We got to help her. It's putting your head down and just going and going and working and going and trying to make everything okay. And you know in your heart you are not okay. But you're trying to make everything okay. Making sure dinners are set, making sure the rooms are clean, making sure your daughter at home is okay, making sure she's doing fine.
Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, how you greeted her, what did you say to her? Obviously she knew something was wrong.
There wasn't no talking, it was all hugs. All hugs.
She was with my parents for those days.
Yeah,
right?
she was with your parents for those days. But the moment we saw her, I hugged her. I squeezed the peanut butter and jelly out of her. I squeezed her so hard, and for her response was, "What's wrong, Dada?" Like, oh We lost your baby. We lost your sister. Where'd she go? Where'd she go? She's
it's
in
such
heaven.
an innocent response.
Right. She's in heaven.
Brandon, let me ask you a question too, and
Sorry.
I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but like, literally, so listeners, I was at Brandon's house this weekend. Today is Monday. I left his house yesterday.
Yes, he did.
My son Ashton, when he comes home, sleeps in Astoria's room, the room
Yes, he
that
does.
was. There's a
Supposed to be
crib.
for-
Her name
yeah.
is on the wall.
Mhm.
There's hot air balloons and things like that are
Yes.
decorated that way. And so you guys were quite literally preparing for a home with two children. And that room is right next to Gabby's room, by the way.
Yes.
She sees it every time she walks to the bathroom. That's right between those two rooms. How did you navigate that reality of walking into a room and still having that room today
Yeah.
that was never
That's what I'm
occupied by your daughter?
So we make sure we speak of her being here, not past tense. So the relationship that Gabby has with Astoria is now and forever would be like just that's her little sister. So we never dismiss it. We never hide anything. I mean, Astoria's ashes are actually in that room.
Yeah.
So we have it in an elephant. Actually,
Yeah.
an elephant, like a piggy bank that we sealed up, and that's our baby. She's inside there. Ashes are inside there. Also, we have a globe too that her ashes are in,
Which is beautiful.
Which is beautiful. Lights up, and it's ironic enough, if you look at it, it looks like there's a sleeping baby. No exaggeration.
Not by design, by the way. But
Not by design. It just happened to happen. I will definitely share this on Instagram and Facebook. So on and so forth. I want everyone to see how beautiful this is.
Brian, I think you've seen Beckham's Flame that we had at our house. Same company did. That's how I ended up getting Beckham's Flame. Did Brandon Joellen's Globe, and it's a beautiful tribute. There's literally it's a sphere that has some of their ashes in there, and then there's a light source underneath that can illuminate it. And Stories, literally, it hits the ceiling, and it
looks like there's a baby.
Take your breath away the first couple times you see it.
Yeah, I think it's so beautiful, and that actually really hit home to me, Brandon. When you don't, it's not past tense; it's present tense. She's here. I mean, what you said is so spot on, and I think can hit home with a lot of our listeners that and you have that. You honor her in the house, so everybody can see, and she's there. And we do the same for Austin, and it's. I'm so proud of you. I love you for that.
I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. It's a day-to-day challenge, but birthdays are fantastic. We try to, give her praise, in so many different ways, just to just to keep her name out there and keep it present. I think the biggest thing also is just making sure people don't forget. And
I think this is an area that I want to probe on a little deeper with you here, Brandon, because I hope this will really resonate with a lot of our listeners. Is you all inspired me, and I'll tell our story at another time. But to even name our children before early and each time, so that when we knew we were going down a pathway, like. There was a name, and there was a real child and a real human. And you guys have done such an unbelievable job. Tell a little bit, and you can give a little levity with this too. I've never in my life thought this was even possible, let alone seen the way Gabby talks about Stori. Talk a little bit about what that's like.
I laugh because this just was a thing last week. So Gabby literally wakes up sometimes in the middle of the night or throughout the day if she's around. Astoria is right next to you, Dad. Where? Right there, Dad. What is she doing?
Stori's tickling me.
Stori's tickling me, or Stori's tickling you. And hand on the Bible. You feel something, and it's not Gabby, my living daughter. You actually do feel something sometimes. Like, my daughter has such a Gabby has such a great relationship with Astoria. It's scary because she sees her all the time. Everywhere. Like, no exaggeration. Excuse me, no exaggeration.
I believe it.
She has a favorite. She talks about
color.
Stori's favorite color and
favorite animal, favorite show that she likes, what she likes to eat, why she likes to eat it, what seat she wants to sit on, where is she going to do, what homework she's going to be doing, what school she's going to go to. This is we have gave just generic information, and Gabby has taken this information and she sees her. She really does. She sees her, and it's some things that you just can't make up. And she has, I mean, kids have imaginations, we get it, but there's something supernatural about this. I mean, she's on the swing set, and the other swing, like, there's no wind going, there's no breeze going. Gabby's on a swing set. Then there's one piece of, other swing, and then there's an open spot for another swing. Both of those pieces are moving, and there's no wind. You be the judge.
Yeah, I believe it so much, and I have to admit, I come from, I'm a non-believer of that spiritual thing before we lost Austin. I'm like, believe in science. I don't really see signs. I keep my head down. But when we lost Austin, and my wife, Lindsay, she dove into that because she really wanted to connect with Austin. And sure enough, I've seen things and signs and symbols that I would never believe. If I said it to myself beforehand, before we lost Austin, I wouldn't believe it. But I commend your daughter for speaking out and talking about it, because it's really incredible. And I know a lot of listeners are looking for those signs, and they're real, and you should embrace them because they're important.
Well, I think the thing that it resonates here for me in this is, we're only in episode 3, but the 3 of us have talked a lot offline of all this and how we honor our children, how we keep their legacy alive. When we talked with Shane, it was talking, saying Sloane's name and having, telling that story. And I think what Brandon and Joellen have done such a beautiful job. It's like, listeners, and this isn't, expert advice, but you want to keep your child's legacy alive, teach your living children about how to keep that legacy alive.
Yes.
Because the way that Gabby literally thinks of and acts like Stori is her sister is the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen. Yeah. And she talks every day, every instance, in a beautiful, not, it's sure. It's not morbid, right? It'll tear your heartstrings every once in a while.
Absolutely.
But in the most beautiful way too. And when you've got that innocence of a child that can talk about, their sibling, not in the things that we know to be true and difficult that we've gone through, but just in a way that is just pure joy and, tickling and colors and all that type of stuff. What a beautiful way to honor our children is to allow your living children to be a part of that story.
I would say,
couldn't agree more.
If there's any chance you can get, just take advantage of that and keep that circle, your house circle, going with that love for your lost child, for sure, forever. Ever.
Yeah. Brandon, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So it's been almost 2 years now, or over 2 years?
Over.
So we haven't really touched on this in the previous episodes, but how are you dealing with Astoria's birthday or that date? How are you addressing that? Obviously, you're keeping her life present in your house, but how's your family dealing with that?
Beginning was rough. I'm not gonna lie to you. Joellen wanted everything to be perfect timing of birth. We got to celebrate the exact time, and we all have lives. Like, it worked, but it wasn't perfected. Now we do the most beautiful thing. We give gifts to the hospital for kids and families who don't have anything or anything in need. We make sure we represent, her birthday in giving to others. or supporting others in those type of aspects. Like God, it was very tough at the beginning. And I'm not saying the haul is going to be even easier, because it's not. But being there to support my wife in these type of situations, I mean, I have my own time personally, but I'm more so the person of supporting, making sure that she's comfortable, making sure that she's okay with what we're doing, so on and so forth, just to make things, easier in the household for her and for us. Gabby has a huge impact on her birthday, so we make sure Gabby has like a gift for any child also too. So she gets to pick out a gift, and then we pick out a gift. So it's something that we incorporate the whole family in, so that we can, I don't know, praise her name, I guess I can say.
Yeah. Brandon, another question for you. If we're a couple years away now from you losing Stori, in hindsight, maybe for the listener that's just gone through this weeks ago, months ago, what's something that you wish you would have known back then that you can't ever know because this is so unexpected, but something that, as you look back, if I only would have known this then, or if I didn't think that I had to do this right away, or whatever it might be, is there anything that comes to mind for you?
I wish I would have videotaped the pregnancy. And the reason I say that, because we have pictures, but like, those moments you could never, you could have them in your head, but I don't know. It's just something I wish I would have did. We took some pictures. We did a lot of pictures. We had them professionally done. We have a beautiful book. We have beautiful pictures of Storia, of us with her story. But I wish we would have did a video. I wish we would have waited a little bit longer, so that more family members and friends could see her. I wish we'd have brought some different clothes, so that we could take some beautiful pictures in the beautiful clothes.
Sure.
There's a few family members I wish I would have had a chance to see her.
Yeah. I appreciate your honesty, man. That's a tough question, and feel free to ask me that when it's my turn too.
I'm gonna rebuttal it for sure, myself.
Yeah. But I think it's real, and it's something that I think men can probably relate to.
Yeah, I totally wish you guys would. I wish. You know what I mean? I snap my fingers.
Yeah,
over.
so I'll say it for you.
Yes,
my wife and I did not get to meet Stori.
Uh-huh.
We were in Connecticut at the time, and these are moments that there's no playbook, as we all know, and you're literally dealing with life flying at your face at the speed of light. And so Brandon and Joellen asked us I said, how can we best support you? And they said, stay in Connecticut and come once the chaos is over. Be there for us when the rest of our family and the rest of other people have, gone back to work, gone back to their daily life. And that's what we did. And we respected that ask. But we didn't get to meet Stori, and that's okay. I have a picture of her right over there in my office here.
I thank you for saying that, because that was a tough one for me to get that one out. I'm not gonna lie to you.
And that's why
I appreciate you. I really do. Yeah, thank you.
But you did nothing wrong, and I think that's the reality. Is you make the right decision in the moment that feels appropriate for you and your wife and your child.
Mm-hmm.
And I hold no ill will towards that. You did the absolute right thing. And it's the tough realities that we deal with.
Yeah. Things you don't know.
Brandon, can you touch a little bit on how you are now as a person and how you've evolved, and tell our listeners, obviously you're co-host of a grief podcast, which I think is important to talk about, but can you talk a little bit about your journey to get to this point where you feel comfortable talking about this? Because it's not an easy thing to talk about.
So me and my wife, we have been going to a support group for the past years since we lost Astoria. Shout out to Guy Winks. Shout out to Amy Kramer. Fantastic.
Amy's phenomenal.
Amy is awesome. But those sessions, even though I didn't talk much, I honestly let my wife do a lot of the talking, and I literally just listened because you're finding out that we were not the only ones going through this traumatic situation. So that helped out a lot. But also just talking about it and letting people know who our daughter was/is. I guess the biggest thing I'm working on is when someone asks you, how many kids do you have? I have to remember, I have 2.
It's a tough
Astoria
question.
and Gabby. Like, you got to remember stuff like that. You got to make sure you say stuff like that so that that you don't forget. So day-to-day
Did you ever have guilt where somebody asked and you just you just, it's in conversation,
sort of like,
and you say, I
how
have
deep
one,
do you want to get into it, man?
and then you
Right,
immediately feel that guilt of oh my God. But then if I backtrack and say, well, I actually have this number and he passed away, and then it's like a bigger thing. But I've experienced that where in the moment I say how many I have at home, and then I realize I forget Austin, and it's a very tough guilt type of response. And
such an awesome point here, Brian, by the way.
Yeah, it is. I learned, like, honestly, I stopped caring about what other people's feelings are. If they feel uncomfortable with me saying I have a child who has passed away, I don't care. I don't care about their feelings. Like, I don't. And I hate to be so strict about it, but I just don't. This is my story. You asked me a question.
Yeah,
here's my answer.
That Linz and I have, and we've worked on we've talked to each other about how do we answer that, and we say we have 3 at home, and a lot of times people don't have follow-ups to that, but if they do,
they imply what they imply,
right? But if they do, we explain to them, we have a 4th in heaven that passed away, but it is a very difficult thing. Because it also just brings back all those memories and the sadness that you had that you just very incredibly explained to us.
And I'll admit, I have not perfected that, Jessica. And I like what you guys have adopted there, Brian, between you and Lindsay. I think that makes a lot of sense. And maybe that's something that Jessica and I can learn, because we struggle with that too. I struggle with context. If somebody at work asks me, as opposed to a friend or, somebody that, I meet in a different setting, for some reason in my mind, those are different responses. Because at work, I'm like, well, maybe I'm not going to get into it. And I don't have a relationship with that person. And I'm not going to have a long-term relationship. So let me just say one, I have Ashton. But the guilt after that is heavy. And I really, really like how you guys have embraced that response. I think that's a good learning for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really Stori is with us, and thank you for sharing.
I appreciate you guys.
Very difficult story.
There's not many times where I actually express it out, to be honest with you. I'm telling you, I don't. I just I let Joellen do all the talking.
Of holding your dead child is a feeling that you're sitting there, you don't believe it, and you don't wish it on anyone.
You're absolutely correct. It's a feeling. I will retract this. I would never wish it upon my worst enemy. That is a feeling that you don't want.
Did you guys have a funeral or a service or anything?
No. So another thing, funeral director, obviously. Wait, we have any funeral director? We don't know any funeral directors. So, ironically, a good friend of our family, their uncle is a funeral director, and he kind of just waved off everything for us and just was like, whatever you need, we got you. So we just did the cremation and kind of just not went on with our day, but like did what we had to do, our own celebration for her and stuff like that.
Well, Brandon, I know how vulnerable this is to open up, and I'm so appreciative that you were the first host willing to step into the space and share Stori's story and your story and Joellen's story and Gabby's story.
Sure.
I admire you, and I am. I hate the fact that you have this experience to help me through mine, but I don't know. We talked at the beginning about how our children helped us through these experiences, and I don't know how we would have gotten through this without you and Joellen.
Family's important.
Family's important.
You know.
Not all
Absolutely.
families sometimes, but the right ones. You'll find the right ones. But I appreciate you guys, and I can contest to this. Be like, through that process, I was hitting you up every other weekend or every other day, like, thank you, I appreciate you, or something. You know, so I appreciated everything that everyone had did for us during that time. It was definitely a learning situation of, you know, how family and friends are strong and you need them. So
yeah,
take full advantage of that, and I appreciate you guys.
Brandon, we'll let you have the final words here to speak Stori's name.
Astoria Lee Thurman, you are a strong little fighter who will continue to fight for all of us. Keep up the good work and look over Gabby, and we'll keep looking over you. I love you. We love you. That's all.
Beautiful.
I appreciate you, Brandon. Guys. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
We love you, Stori. Love you, Brandon. Thank you for your boldness here and willingness to be brave here and lead us through this. Thank you, listeners, for taking the time. We hope this was as cathartic for you as it is for us. And we look forward to talking to you next week. Thanks, everyone. Love you guys.
We love you guys.
If you valued from this content, we ask you to share this podcast with others that could equally benefit. Leave us a 5-star review on whichever platform you're listening to help us improve our outreach, and to follow Guys in Grief on Instagram and Facebook. Also, if you'd like to join us and share your story, email us at guysandgrief@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.